Is here, president of Argyle Communications PR firm. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what a shocker. On Friday, it had been speculated, but I don't think many people thought it was really going to happen, and it did. Rob Ford dropped out of the race for mayor. Doug Ford has stepped in to take his place. Now, from just sort of a PR standpoint, how do you think that how's that resonating?
Well, in some ways, it had already been speculated upon, and so, some of that was kind of priced into people's reaction, but nonetheless, there was something kind of stunning about it, the idea that, well, the night has fallen, and so he passes the torch to his brother. It's like a medieval story of some sort.
Right, exactly, or like there's some sort of line of succession.
Yeah, yeah, and so, I mean, I think it's interesting because it is kind of a Hail Mary pass, right? I mean, the reality is they're trying to reboot a race that was all but over realistically, right? I mean, Rob Ford was down 10 to 15 points in the polls, depending on which poll you believe, and he had very little second choice support, and so the reality is the odds of him winning were very small. Now, obviously, we can all relate to the tragedy that happened, but the question is that loyalty transferable to his brother Doug? I'm not so sure it is.
Yeah, there are a couple of ways of looking at this, because you have a very united Ford Nation. You wonder how united a Ford Nation will be under him, and you wonder if this is the most that Doug Ford could get. In other words, that the only way he could go is down. The flip side to that is people say, okay, this is a new candidate. Yep. This is maybe a different version of Ford, less baggage, maybe the personality issue. Well, there's good and bad, right? But maybe this is a different way of looking at it. What do you think?
No, I mean, it's entirely possible. There's no question that for all candidates there are fresh opportunities and fresh risks, right? I mean, for Doug Ford, no question, less personal baggage, but in some ways just as much, if not more, political baggage, given how, he's built a reputation of being a really pugnacious guy, right? I mean, he has had very, very fraught relationships with City Council as a member of the council.
When the chief of police.
Well, exactly.
And when things just kind of fly out of his mouth, and then he had to make that formal apology to the chief. Right.
So if you think about how Rob Ford won last time, and the reason why so often the rules of political gravity didn't seem to apply to Rob Ford, right? It's because despite everything, he had a certain discipline. Doug Ford has not shown that same discipline so far in his career, and he's relatively untested as a politician.
So Daniel, I want to know what you thought about Doug Ford's speech on Friday, 7 o'clock. He came out, we were showing footage earlier, and said, give me a couple of days, I got to get my ducks in a row, then I will start my campaign. But for all intents and purposes, that was the first day of his campaign. How do you think he did?
Well, I think in his own frame, I think he did okay. I mean, he realized that, look, I don't have to jump in and get into the first debate on Sunday night. I mean, he realizes that whenever he does choose to enter the campaign and go to the first debate, he's going to get a ton of attention. So he may as well do it on his own terms and of his own choosing. Second, in some ways, and it's important not to be crass about this, and he has to be very careful about that, but the more he talks about his brother and his brother's illness, at least in the short term, the more likely he is to consolidate that core vote and inherit it from Rob Ford.
There's another part of this story which is getting some attention, and some questions are being asked of the timing of this. You look back at Nick Cuvallis, who's the former campaign manager for Rob Ford in the last election, and he sent out a tweet in May that said, you heard it here first, that Rob Ford will run in Ward 2 and win. Doug Ford will run for mayor and lose. Yeah. So what are your thoughts of this? I mean, is this just pure speculation? And what are your thoughts in terms of sort of having this planned perhaps months in advance?
Well, it's tough to speculate on exactly what happened since none of us were on the inside. But having said that, it's not inconceivable, I think, given the incredibly serious challenges Rob Ford was having, the fact that for the last few years the guy has not been in control at City Hall and he's not been in control of his life. And so in that circumstance, it's not surprising that the family and the campaign might think, what's plan B, and develop a plan B. Now, is Doug Ford being transparent about that? Well, we don't know, right? I mean, he's claiming there was never a plan B, but I think it's clear there's emerging evidence to the contrary.
And as far as John Tory and Olivia Chow are concerned, as they move forward, how do you think they've handled it so far? Because John Tory on the weekend was talking pretty tough and just saying, okay, it's Doug Ford now, let's go. We need to stop the Ford agenda.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Liza. I think that it was interesting, the first day reaction from both, and I think they both did what they had to do. For John Tory, he's the front runner, it's his to lose, and so for him, it made a lot of sense right away to say, okay, well, I have sympathy for Rob, but Doug is another matter. He's a candidate, and I have to take him on as a candidate, and it's in his interest to portray them as virtually identical, each equally unable to work with council. With Olivia Chow, she was a lot more muted initially, right? She said, I'm going to let them have their space. I know it's a hard day. And I think what she's trying to do, in addition to it being, I think, her very authentic reaction, not wanting to mix it up on day one, I think for her, she actually, I think, hopes that this shakeup in the race will benefit her, and maybe some of those populist votes that Rob Ford had pulled in might all of a sudden go to her.
Let them fight it out.
Well, yeah, because in many ways people misunderstand the Rob Ford phenomenon as a conservative, voting bloc. I think a lot of it is just a voting bloc that believes in someone who speaks for the dispossessed, and perhaps she hopes to inherit that.
Right. Well, make sure to tune in to the News Hour tonight at 5:30. Global News has commissioned a poll being done by Ipsos Reid, asking people how they feel about Doug Ford stepping into the race, so we'll have those answers for you tonight. Dan Tisch, president of Argyle Communications, thank you so much.
My pleasure.